Please, Ontiveros are hereby recognized.
Thank you. Before Her Honor starts her interpellation, the body will recall yesterday Senator Sherwin had a long manifestation. If I may just address that first so Her Honor can take a seat. It won't be that long, but it's long enough that she may want to take her seat.
Certainly, Mr. President, and thank you, good gentlewoman from Taguig and Pateros.
Thank you. Mr. President, as mentioned yesterday, I wish to address the concerns raised by our esteemed colleague, former chairperson of the Committee on Energy, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, regarding the Philippine Natural Gas Industry Development Bill that I am currently sponsoring. This bill aims to develop the natural gas industry, which is critical to energy security, by revitalizing indigenous gas exploration, giving importance to the country's own gas supply, and developing liquid natural gas infrastructures as well. Mr. President, this measure will benefit both investors in indigenous natural gas and imported natural gas, and of course, the Filipino people. Contrary to yesterday's manifestation by the gentleman from Valenzuela, we are not leaving the entire supply of natural gas in the hands of one entity. All interested parties are welcome to participate. That is precisely why we are developing the industry. It is a sad, sad state we are in right now. From 150 wells in the 1970s, there have been no additional drilling efforts since 2019. Are we going to let this industry die? Are we going to be dependent on imported natural gas? As I repeatedly stated during the period of interpellation, this is not about indigenous gas versus imported LNG. We will need both indigenous natural gas and imported LNG, and even other sources of fuel to sustain our energy needs. Mr. President, I would like to emphasize that prioritizing our own gas resources is necessary for our country's energy security. This is a no-brainer. Saan ka naman nakakita ng bansa na inuna pa ang imported, umasa na lang sa imported, bagamat meron naman sariling supply? Let us not allow our failure in the agricultural sector to happen in the energy sector. Let's take a moment and think about that. If we want indigenous to be cheaper, let's create an environment that will encourage competition, encourage the development of indigenous gas. Also, indigenous gas is owned by the Filipino people. We already went through this many times during this period of interpellation. 60% of the net proceeds from indigenous gas go back to the government. Simply put, it's Filipino gas for the Filipino people. We must support the growth of natural gas, which includes imported gas. This is what is provided for in the bill. On another note, natural gas will likewise serve as our transition fuel to renewable energy, which is part of the Philippine Energy Plan. Until new technologies for energy storage are available, we will need a more flexible and cleaner baseload as compared to coal. This is our transition fuel. This is our transition plan. We cannot rely on coal. We should not rely on coal. The DOE shall establish mechanisms for the optimal and full utilization of indigenous natural gas in the generation, transmission, distribution, and supply of power, subject to standards and limitations consistent with the state policy of ensuring energy security and consumer welfare. This is written in the bill, Mr. President. Let's take a stand. Prioritize indigenous, support indigenous, and buy indigenous. It ensures a continuous and stable energy supply in the country, even or despite unpredictable events occurring in the global market. With that, Mr. President, I am ready for the interpellation of our Deputy Minority Floor Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pia. Senator Risa, you have the floor.
Salamat, Mr. President, and dear gentlewoman from Taguig and Pateros, I just hope that you will be able to pagbigyan nyo yung aking mga tanong sa bill natin ngayong araw.
Yes, yes, Mr. President, we are ready and we'll do our best to answer the questions of Her Honor.
Thank you, good gentlewoman. My interpellation is in three parts, and at any point that the good gentlewoman would prefer that I suspend, I may do so, but I'll do it part by part in order. So, dun po sa unang bahagi, as we delve into these critical questions about the Philippines' energy future, it's imperative to emphasize that our approach to renewable energy must be unwavering and ambitious. While gas and LNG may serve as a transitional bridge, we must be vigilant to ensure they do not become a prolonged detour from our ultimate goal of a sustainable, renewable energy landscape. So, the following questions in the first part of my interpellation address crucial concerns such as the risk of stranded assets, potential regulatory capture, and the long-term costs to consumers. They also touch on the delicate balance between ensuring energy security and maintaining environmental integrity. Moreover, these inquiries aim to scrutinize our strategies to avoid overinvestment in LNG infrastructure that could hinder our competitiveness against countries transitioning more rapidly to cheaper renewable energy sources. So una po, how can the Department of Energy effectively balance the immediate need for energy security through LNG imports with the need to accelerate achievement of our environmental goals, Mr. President?
Mr. President, the long answer to Her Honor's first question on how the Department of Energy will make that transition, and I think she wants it to be an ambitious transition to renewable energy, and at the same time, I guess, use the transition plan as very responsibly, is contained in the Philippine Energy Plan, no?
Okay.
But precisely why we need this transition plan, because, and I did not know this, dear colleagues, until very recently when I had to, of course, read up and educate myself when I became the chairman of the Committee on Energy. I'm very pro-renewables, but I did not know what I know now, which is for us to really be able to transition to renewable, we need to invest in storage. That is the biggest issue with renewable. That is precisely why it cannot be used as a base load now. In as much as we would like to all be renewable, we do not have the capacity to make that happen because it cannot be used as the baseload. Now, can we just purchase overnight by next year the storage facilities to make this happen? I don't think so, Mr. President. I would be very happy to be educated by anyone in the room, any expert that will tell us that that can happen. But not only is it extremely expensive, the storage, I think the hope is that in a few years, it can become more reasonably priced, because until we can store it, ang dami ring natatapon din na renewable energy. Sayang. So what is our transition plan? Precisely itong natural gas. And then, as to go into details on this, is the balance now between indigenous natural gas and imported natural gas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, my second question, after a follow-up question to this first one, will actually be also about that matter of storage. No, yung FSRUs ba, or floating storage and regasification units, or land-based LNG terminals. But a follow-up question first, or a couple of follow-up questions first to this first question. Can the good sponsor provide specific metrics and timelines for this phased approach? And how would they compare to countries successfully balancing LNG and renewables?
Is that the international standard, 50% by 2040? So, check the SDGs. Check the SDG. So, Mr. President, The Philippine Energy Plan provides for a shift to 50% renewables by 2040. And what I am checking right now is what are the different standards of the other countries. We can easily provide that in a few minutes. So if Your Honor doesn't mind proceeding to the next question, but that is a metric that we can easily pull up.
All right, no problem, good sponsor. Thank you. I can wait for that during our interpellation, particularly this first part of my interpellation. Also, how will you ensure, good sponsor, that the bridge provided by LNG doesn't become a long-term dependency, potentially hindering the urgent transition to renewables?
Well, that, Mr. President, I think is not very difficult to project because if the energy plan states a shift to 50% renewables in 2040, so that is around 15 years from now, then 50% will still not be renewable. And so if we were to choose what we will prioritize after renewables, then our best bet, I think no one will argue, would be our indigenous natural gas and then imported natural gas, which is yun nga, a transition fuel, and then the others. So there will still be a market, Mr. President. The market for LNG will not go away by 2040 or 2050 because we cannot transition completely to renewables in the next 15 to 20 years.
Of course, Mr. President, I guess that we could project that 50% would still not be renewables by 2040.
Yes.
Only because DOE set that very modest target of only 50% by 2040 instead of stretching further for a higher percentage of our energy mix to be made up by renewable energy. So this is related to this whole first question about a balance, about timelines for a phased approach, and about making sure that the transition, or rather making sure that our shift to renewable energies is not pegged on the transition, kundi kabaliktaran, na yung transition is pegged to yung pinaka-ambitious na RE targets na kaya nating iset. In any case, I will leave this part of the interpellation at this for now and go on to my next question about storage. But before I do that, let me rephrase this first question one more time. How much LNG?
Mr. President,
Yes,
Mr.
Mr. Good
I'll
Sponsor.
just add, no, because I know Her Honor is like this representation, very keen on expediting, and ayaw din natin minsan yung masyadong modest, di ba? So I wanted to ask, and I did ask our resource persons, ano naman yung hindi modest na expectation? So to be more aggressive in the shift to renewable, then
Yes.
that would now include, Mr. President, the mix of nuclear. And
Sorry,
by
the mix
20
of?
nuclear.
Naku.
Yes, I know. So, but that is
Okay.
that is the reality. When and I mean this bill does not include nuclear, so I wouldn't
Yes.
really want to go in that direction on the discussion. But I am being honest about what those projections are. If we will include nuclear, and many countries have made that shift during the Ukraine shift in direction during the Ukraine war. Then by 2050, 70% na yung target. So I'm just putting that there for Her Honor to include in her notes.
Thank you, good sponsor. Of course, prejudicial question, and I've long answered it, at least for myself, just for this representation. Ang nuclear energy ay hindi renewable energy. So hindi ko rin siya maikwenta sa energy mix natin, even for a more ambitious target of 70% mix of renewable energies by 2050. I do think kaya sanang nagtakda ng mas ambisyosong target ang DOE for renewable energies in the energy mix using true renewables and excluding nuclear. But let me rephrase my first question one more time.
You have naman. Okay. Sorry again for
Yes,
interrupting. So
good
one
sponsor.
last point.
Apo.
DOE actually has different scenarios. So listening to her honor's concerns that what would it be if it did not include nuclear, we will just submit because they are different combinations, Mr. President. So her honor can proceed, but we will just submit that to her.
Thank you, good sponsor. Actually, helpful yon kasi mag-figure din yon sa yung isang follow-up question na specific metrics and timelines for the phased approach. So I'll just rephrase my first question one more time. How much LNG does DOE envision in our energy mix by 2040? And would this bill enable us to reach the RE mix by 2040?
Megawatts, and then is what? From where to what?
Same po, same. Same na ngayon. From 3,000.
No, sorry. So, ang LNG ngayon is 3,700. And by natural gas. And then by 2040, it will be 11K.
For business as usual. Clean energy, 7,600.
Pero kung gusto natin pure clean energy, i-loss nila. Ang natural gas is 3,700, aakyat ng 11. So what is 7,600?
Cleaner energy. That would be natural gas. From somebody, I think,
I thought the first one was natural gas,
in
7 to 11.
2042, ang assumption wala nang malampaya, and we're not yet sure kung meron sa pala. Kaya ito, posibleng may potential na pwedeng fuel, pwedeng pumasok din ang
I'm very lost now. A minute suspension. Okay. A minute suspension, please. I'm very lost, sorry. You're just telling me now, natural gas is 3 cents. And by 2040. Okay. Oh. So what is, so. Ready to resume?
Sure.
Okay. So, Mr. President, currently, we are using 3,700 megawatts of natural gas. And this is projected to go up to 11,000 megawatts if we continue if we only have the same volume coming from renewable energy. But so the second scenario is if we increase our renewable energy, then in 2040, our nat gas will still go up from the current 3,700, but only to 7,600 megawatts, because the rest will be taken up by renewable energy. And that, I suppose, is the scenario that Her Honor and this representation would be happier with.
Yes, good sponsor. It would be better, and I'm glad that the good sponsor and I share that sentiment about it. But we could make it even better. And actually, there might be an unintended consequence of our bill, because currently, under the Philippine Energy Plan, the plan is, or the current situation at present is 60% is accounted for by coal in our energy mix, if we add LNG, would this formula allow us to increase the RE energy mix by 50%, or would it, on the contrary, further increase the fossil share in our energy mix? Kasi ang LNG ay fossil din siya. So, baka yung unintended consequence ay mas lalong hindi natin matupad yung commitments natin under the Paris Agreement of 70%, 75% reduction in our emissions. Good sponsor.
Well, actually, Mr. President, we've also asked those questions, and the reality is the demand for power and electricity will keep on getting higher in our country. We're a developing country. If you look at what our targets are, it is to even further industrialize. We still have many areas that do not have adequate electricity, so the demand will continue to be higher. So the challenge is for the DOE to allocate those increased demands for more renewables, and to the extent that it cannot, and I am with her honor there, that we don't want our reliance on natural gas to be the deterrent to transition to renewable energy, and that is why the energy plan is very clear that it is a transition fuel, because the idea really is to transition, but knowing that there will be an increased demand for the totality of the energy that is needed. And I have put it on record, and again, I also am very willing to be educated, that one of the major the obstacles for a complete shift to renewable right away is really the storage. That is something, like I said, I only learned when I had to study this energy issues more closely. We do not have this, and it is also very expensive. And if you, I have asked other players in the field, and it's not something readily available yet, Mr. President. Maybe there will be new technology, there will be improvement in the discovery of ways to store, but until that happens, the transition will not be something available to us in the next decade.
Salamat, good sponsor. Dadako na nga ako ngayon sa tanong tungkol sa storage. Saying only, just to, by way of closing my first question for now, na masaya ako na the good sponsor has indicated that there's a possible range of upping the LNG share from the current 3,700 megawatts to a range of 7,600 to 11,000 megawatts.
To be clear, ma'am,
yes, good
to be clear,
sponsor.
Mr. President, that is not LNG, that's natural gas.
Oh.
Which includes...
Okay, natural gas, nat
Kasi
gas.
yung liquefied, pag sinabing LNG, liquefied na yon, and then they have to regasify, which is why this representation keeps on repeating that is why it is inherently, it tends to be more expensive, because yung LNG, hindi yan pwedeng i-pipe diretso sa atin. So dadating yan ng liquid, tapos i-regasify. So
Right.
if our colleagues will recall, during the interpellation with Senator Sherwin Gatchalian yesterday, for 2 days in a row, we clarified that yung presyo na sinasabi niya na medyo dikit sa presyo ng indigenous gas, if you add the cost of regasification, by far mas mahal yung imported LNG.
By about 2 pesos, good sponsor, if I remember
Dollars.
correctly from the previous.
Dollars.
All right, good sponsor. And salamat for the important correction. Yes, nat gas, since this is our nat gas bill. Still, gusto ko lang i-appreciate na pinoint out ng good sponsor that there's a range of possible
Yes,
target
you are
and
correct with
achievement.
that.
Opo.
Yes, Mr.
From
President.
7.6 megawatts to 11K megawatts from the current 3,700 megawatts. At kung magiging purposeful talaga ang DOE at mas ambisyoso dun sa RE target sa energy mix natin, then pwedeng talagang mas i-push muna yung pag-up ng share ng RE sa energy mix, so that we may not have to go on the high end of the 7,600 megawatts to 11,000 megawatts target for nat gas, pero kumbaga maging first option ang renewable energies, and tunay na pantawid lang, no, transition yung natural gas. So I'll leave that question here for now. Dako na ako dun sa tanong tungkol sa storage na sinabi nga ng good sponsor, napaka-importanteng pag-usapan in terms of investment. So, given the uncertainties in future gas demand, and sinabi na nga ng good sponsor, the demand will rise for energy in general. But given the uncertainties in future, in particular gas demand, and the rapid evolution of renewable energy technologies, how should the DOE evaluate the trade-offs between flexible, lower-cost FSRU or floating storage and regasification units solutions, trade-off sa pagitan nun at yung mga more capital-intensive land-based LNG terminals?
Well, Mr. President, precisely we empower the DOE to make that determination at the proper time. This bill does not dictate, Mr. President, because I have always taken the position that as lawmakers, it is not our job to make business decisions or to regulate in those details. So maganda ho yung tanong ng ating kasama, pero I think what needs to be emphasized is that si DOE ang equipped to make those proper decisions. Tama po kayo. There will, and as to whether it's a capital-intensive, facility that will last 50 years, tapos hindi naman pala kailangan for 50 years, mas maganda yung floating device. Kaya na po nila yun. In fact, if you look at the bill, we are supportive of the manpower that will be needed. Diba, we have our regulatory bodies that really need to be experts in this so that they can make the proper decisions or give the proper guidelines to create that environment. Kasi pangit naman talaga na magki-create ka ng environment pointing to one thing when that demand for that might be not as long term. But I also need to say that I'm almost certain that lahat naman mag-i-invest, we're talking about mega bucks here. Like, they do their research naman, no? Sila din naman ang gagastos, hindi naman ho ang gobyerno magpapatayo niyan. So sila din ang gagastos niyan. So sila din ang, they will also use their resources to determine what would be the best investment in storage facilities, Mr. President.
Salamat, Mr. President. And nabanggit na rin ng good sponsor, I will also ask a question later about precisely yung expertise or yung capacity ng DOE at yung attached agencies niya to exercise or to deploy their expertise in this admittedly very new field for the energy sector in our country, yung nat gas field. And of course, bagamat yung mga stakeholders natin from the private sector will be deploying the greater part of the capital here, kailangan sabihin din ng DOE sa kanila ano yung specs na sa tingin ng department pinaka-optimal para sa ating public. Dahil these may be business decisions primarily for the private sector stakeholders, pero para sa energy regulatory bodies natin, importante din mag-weigh in sila ngayon pa lamang. In terms, yes, of the business or the economics of it, but also in terms of the environmental aspect, at saka in terms of achieving the overall objectives of the Philippine Energy Plan. Diba? Ano yung wisdom ng DOE sa ngayon tungkol sa anong klaseng storage mas gusto nilang kumiling ang ating private sector stakeholders, whether itong floating or yung mga land-based. Lalo na environmentally sensitive din yung ibang mga area kung saan nakatayo na at balak pang itayo yung mga storage facilities natin. So, follow-up question po, how does DOE plan to mitigate the risk of stranded assets, particularly nga dun sa land-based terminals, just in case the optimal scenario materializes if renewable energy adoption outpaces projections, Mr. President?
Actually, Mr. President, I feel that those are the real challenges that the government and DOE in particular will face, and also the investors. And that's why this representation feels that it's very important to communicate the right message. So the number one is renewables. I mean, I may not say it as often in the course of defending this bill over 3 hours or 4 hours in a day, because the bill is on Nat Gas bill. But I say it often enough, and I will repeat it because it is the question Her Honor poses, that renewable is the priority, followed by the transition fuel. So yes, it is tricky. Let's not pretend that it is not. There may be mistakes along the way. That is quite, I think it is impossible to predict to an exact number what the exact mix will be. But you know, with the use of technology, with the right expertise, they can reasonably assume what needs to be, where the investments need to be made. And that is why the energy plan supported by this bill will clearly say that renewable energy, then the transition fuel. But Her Honor very well knows, because it's in the news, even those operating coal plants are asking for permission to continue operations and even to expand their operations. So those are all issues that DOE has to deal with. They are environmental, they are political, they are financial. So kailangan magagaling yung mga tao natin to respond to those questions. And it is a cheap source. So let's not pretend that these are easy questions to answer. Di ba? Sino bang may ayaw ng mura? O, pero sino bang may gusto ng madumi? So, you know, it is, Her Honor asked the right questions because it is truly a balancing act that DOE has to have the stomach to respond to responsibly and for the sake of the future.
Salamat, good sponsor. And of course, kailangan pa rin nating itanong, at mamaya itatanong ko rin dun sa tanong ko tungkol sa presyo, how mura really is mura? At saka ang malinis ba talaga malinis or hindi rin marumi sa enerhiya? And I guess yung isang nakapaloob dun sa tanong ko, it's biased. If we had to choose between the two, maybe biased more for floating storage rather than land-based. Not to say na imposibleng maging stranded asset din yung floating, yung FSRUs, pero parang mas may possibility maging stranded asset ang land-based terminals. But having said that, yun na nga, kahit dun sa usapin ng FSRUs o floating storage and regasification units, what safeguards are in place to ensure that even though the supposed flexibility of FSRUs doesn't lead to prolonged reliance on LNG or on nat gas at the expense of renewable energy development?
Can Her Honor just repeat that? What,
Yes, good
what
sponsor.
safeguards?
What safeguards are in place para siguruhin na kahit yung sinasabing flexibility ng mga FSRUs o floating storage and regasification units, na hindi yun hahantong sa prolonged reliance sa LNG o sa nat gas, na ang magsasuffer ay yung renewable energy development.
Actually, Mr. President, they just have to follow the plan. The renewable energy plan is their roadmap. So if they stick with it, they should not rely on this transition plan, no? So if they get and I understand where Her Honor is coming from, because the renewable energy advocates will always say that push for renewable, push. In fact, some don't even believe in a transition fuel. But like I said, I would be happy to be educated if how to make a transition plan that by next year, renewable na kaagad. I would be happy to, because sino bang may ayaw? I'm an environmentalist. I used to run in the heart of Makati with all the construction going on, with all the tambuchos. Of course, I don't want to do that, but wala akong choice. Nagtatrabaho ko as a lowly associate in a law office, and that's the place I run. So I want cleaner energy. I want to run in a cleaner place. I want my children and grandchildren to live in a cleaner environment. But if the DOE sticks to the plan, then that is their guide. I cannot really assure Her Honor other than, and Her Honor has been witness to this. Pag hindi nasunod yung plan, di ba? And we have unraveled so many of those in the Senate. Doon sorry to put it this way, doon nagkaka-leche-leche. Kasi maganda naman yung plan, tapos hindi naman sinusunod. So, I think what we need here is to be very clear, and we'll be very happy to include stronger provisions on the importance of sticking to that energy plan, or even not being kampante about that energy plan and seeking to yung sinabi nung what her honor said na she's not so happy with these modest targets, diba? Let's be aggressive about it. And that's why, in that sense, maganda naman din yung facilities na may flexibility ng konti, kasi pag medyo yung demand for LNG is higher, pwede naman ma-expand itong facilities na to. But, those are the risks then that I've come to learn, and the example I like to give is when we determine that it is a necessity that we do not, wag natin tipirin yung paggawa ng matinong school building. On hindsight, pwede mong sabihin na, 10% lang naman pala ng school building yung nababagyo, yung tinatamaan ng earthquake, hindi na kailangan yung heavy duty. But you can't make those mistakes, hindi ho ba? So in the same way with energy, they have to go full speed ahead and invest in the renewables and also make the investments in the transition fuels as well, Mr. President.
Salamat, good sponsor, sa pagbanggit nyo sa possibility ng stronger provisions at the proper time sa period of amendments. Susubukan ng representasyong itong mag-craft ng ganong klaseng stronger provisions, safeguards nga po, dahil hindi ko pa sigurado kung kahit yung buong Philippine Energy Plan ay sapat na na-anticipate itong pag-usbong, no, ng parang a very compelling transition period led by natural gas. So, dako sa susunod na tanong ko, good sponsor, Mr. President, in the course of the hearings and even the briefings, has the sponsor perhaps required DOE to provide an accounting and analysis of the financial incentives and support mechanisms that will be made available, particularly for LNG importation, and specifically focusing on the following areas? Dalawa po ito. May accounting and analysis ba in the area of tax breaks and government liabilities? Was DOE able to detail the types of tax breaks, government contingent liabilities, if any, and any complementary government-funded infrastructure initiatives, and perhaps even guarantees of cost recovery for LNG importation, storage, and distribution facilities?
No, but first of all, there's no incentive for importation. So, maybe for building storage and building capacity.
So actually, Mr. President, the importation of LNG has been ongoing, and there is no new incentive. Specifically, I'm referring to the VAT incentives, because the VAT incentives are only for the VAT exemptions, to be clear, are only for the indigenous natural gas. But there is a provision which seeks to include the facilities to be used for natural gas to be included in the Tier 3 of CREATE. And that is based on our determination that energy security should be a prime concern in terms of achieving economic development. And if you look at the enumeration in Tier 3 of CREATE, the last item, letter V or 5, refers to activities that contribute to catch up, the catch up of the economy. And what what other factor is contributing to our catch-up than a steady energy supply? If you look at the top 5 reasons why we do not have as many investors as our ASEAN neighbors have, electricity is always there. So that is the response, Mr. President.
Thank you, good sponsor. A little later, may tanong din ako tungkol dun sa investment situation dito sa Pilipinas and how NatGas or the transition would play into that. But one more question about the accounting and analysis on the finance side. What about may focus na ba ang DOE on existing subsidies to identify and describe the current subsidies and support being provided for gas exploration, transmission, and related activities?
Well, sadly, Mr. President, wala nga tayong exploration eh. So zero yan. So zero. Zero ang lumalabas sa atin. But should there be takers, which is what this bill intends to support, but even without the bill, DOE has taken the lead on that and they have bidding going on, then PD 87 provides for those incentives. And basically, I can explain what it is in a nutshell, is that this exploration and development costs hundreds of millions into the billions of pesos to happen. And if they don't discover anything, there is no cost to government. But if they do discover, then that is where the formula kicks in and there is a sharing. And I think Her Honor has heard this representation explain that sharing quite a number of times already.
Yes.
But 60% of the revenues would go back to government.
Thank you, good sponsor. Ito bang mga initial analysis on the tax breaks, on subsidies, these analyses that are inputs to cost-benefit analysis, available na po ba sila?
Just to be clear, Mr. President, we are not changing anything in this bill on the upstream side in terms of the incentives for exploration development. That is covered by PD 87, and we are not touching that. So the DOE is aware of Her Honor's question. We can pass that on, but it's not something that we have prepared to discuss just because it's not covered by this bill, Mr. President.
I see. All right, good sponsor. In that case, para lang mas may material tayo to look at or to try to craft cost-benefit analyses also for the midstream and downstream. So if we don't have all these parts of the analysis yet, and since the proposed bill will create entitlements for these, may I request na lang through the good sponsor that DOE also submit to us or provide us with the following insights. Dalawa rin. So una, a per kilowatt hour computation of the price of gas from both imported LNG and domestically produced sources. And if the department could include in that any assumptions of government support or variables that may affect these calculations. And secondly, kung maaring makapag-submit ang DOE sa atin through the good sponsor, computations for a scenario where, at dito bumabalik ako sa naunang tanong ko, a scenario where we exclusively build only floating storage and regasification units or FSRUs, taking note of their redeployability. If DOE could include computations on the potential resources that could be then freed up for renewable energy programs. If FSRUs are utilized instead of traditional land-based and more financially massive LNG facilities.
Your Honor, the DOE has heard Her Honor's questions and we have instructed them to provide. But we just like to put on record that the investments are coming from private individuals, private entities. So as long as the renewable energy plan if we stick to that renewable energy plan, then it is up to the investors to determine if they are investing in renewable energy, if they are investing in LNG. Some of them may be the same parties, some of them may be different parties. But the plan is there to help guide them in what kind of energy, where the bulk of the purchases will be. So for an investor to determine if they will do a floating device or a permanent structure, I do believe that is their freedom of that is where we do not interfere with the business decisions of these individuals. But of course, DOE can provide the timelines, like if they say na the demand might be very volatile. Because ang dami nating indigenous gas. So baka konti lang yung demand, you might prefer to build a smaller storage facility na magagamit parate pero small, or you might prefer a floating vessel that can be expanded and retracted. So that's where, Your Honor, to be perfectly honest, we leave it to the DOE and the private investors to hash out, no, that will no longer be covered by this measure, Mr. President.
Perhaps this representation can just attempt in the period of amendments to push this idea a bit further because, of course, government does not interfere with the individual business decisions of private investors. Pero dahil ang Philippine Energy Plan, yung kumbaga Biblia natin dito, even in discussing the bill, although all stakeholders could have participated, government led the formulation of the plan, and government could also recommend or guide improvements to the plan. Kanina pinag-usapan natin stronger provisions on on storage. So and government could, still within the context of the Philippine Energy Plan, visualize alternative scenarios and compute on those alternative scenarios. So lalo na kung bukod sa economic, there are also environmental and other considerations. So I'll just return to this at the proper time, good sponsor, in the period of amendments. So dako po ako sa susunod na tanong ko. Okay. In an unlikely scenario where new technologies make for much more available and cheaper LNG from abroad, in that unlikely scenario, how could the Philippines ensure that its investment in LNG infrastructure genuinely supports the transition to renewable energy rather than create a long-term dependence on fossil fuels, Mr. President?
Well, as this representation has explained during the previous interpellations, our demand for energy is so high. If we were a Nordic country, and I'm just making this up, no, but I always use that as an example, where you have 8 million people and they are fully able to supply all the energy needs, I think they would be more problematic about how to make those shifts. But we have brownouts happening all over the country. And even in the next 10 years, our indigenous gas will not be able to supply all the transition fuel that is needed. So I think that is not the biggest problem we will have. I think it would be a great problem if renewable energy storage technology improves rapidly so that market can really grow. And then indigenous gas, there are more wells that will be discovered. And we can build more storage facilities. If Her Honor prefers that it's more conservative, DOE can listen. But that will, at the end of the day, also be based on the business judgment of the investors when they see that the opportunities are there. they will make those decisions. But they already know that the goal is renewable. They know that already. And next, if we pass this bill, the second priority will be indigenous gas. But the discoveries will not happen immediately. In fact, after discovery, it takes, did I hear right, 6 years? 4 to 7 years after discovery. So, yung floating vessels na sinasabi ng ating kasamahan, siguro naman 6 na buwan, pwede nang makarating na yan dito. So they can use some of those, and then they can even rent that, I suppose, and return it, and then build a storage facility. So I think they can manage. Ang hina naman natin if we can't manage that.
Thank you, good sponsor. And how will these phase-out timelines and renewable energy milestones be enforced? And what penalties will be in place for non-compliance?
I think that would be a subject matter of another bill. This representation would be happy to take a look at that. If Her Honor would like to file a resolution, I think that's a great idea to really see how these phase-out plans, because even now, I've seen very interesting shifts in the technology of solar panels. Like, parang mukha na lang siyang tint. Mukha na lang siyang tint na pwedeng idikit sa mga salamin. So, paano kung may investor dyan na bumili na ng mga ang bibigat, na ang lalaki? But I suppose for the next, I don't know how long, may demand pa doon. Baka yung tinted na yun, ano pa lang, nasa developmental stage. But that is the world we live in, no? Technology changes rapidly. And even those in renewable, now, if they're not willing to make the shift, mapapag-iwanan din. So, I think it's a sector that people are willing to take risks, but also very much willing, I hope, to take the risk in the right direction.
I share that hope, good sponsor. And salamat dun sa suggestion na maybe craft another bill or file a resolution regarding this question. Another option, of course, is also to look
Sorry,
at...
Madam,
Yes,
Mr.
good
President, I
sponsor.
forgot the point of giving that example pala in the shift to the easier, the thinner, the lighter solar panels is what then do you do with all these big heavy
panels.
solar equipment? So that's why I believe that Her Honor's question is valid, and the need for legislation may be very important, because what do you call that phase, yung when you clean it up and you decommissioning, yon. Kasi sa natural gas we have that, the decommissioning. But if you think about it, and I don't know what the proper phrase is sa renewable, di dapat may ganun din, di ba? Kasi magshi-shift ka nga sa mas there will be a natural shift. So I think it's worth looking into another time, Mr. President.
I agree, a good sponsor, Mr. President, it's worth looking into. But I think not necessarily another time. Possibly even within this bill. Kasi,
Meron na.
ang tawag nito,
We
are
have that, Your
guided-
Honor,
Yes, good
within this
sponsor?
bill. We have the provision on the decommissioning.
Ah.
That's part of the lifespan from the exploration, discovery, development, transportation, and then delivery to the end user, and then the decommissioning. That is covered, Mr. President. As far as natural gas is concerned, this is the right time. Her Honor is correct. So any
Great.
concerns or improvement on the measure on that is very welcome here.
Maraming salamat, good sponsor. That is great to hear, Mr. President. Dahil, di ba, guided overall by the Philippine Energy Plan, papunta naman tayo sa gusto natin mas sustainable na energy mix, energy situation by 2040. As the good sponsor said, that's a good sweet 16 years from now. And yung ibang mga timetables na pinag-uusapan natin in terms of nat gas in particular are shorter chunks, smaller chunks of time. 6 months or 4 to 7 years kanina pinag-uusapan. So there's really an opening by insisting that the renewable energy targets envisioned in the Philippine Energy Plan will indeed be targeted at hopefully mas ambitiously, and that with the emergence of this scintillating transition period of nat gas, that we don't fall in love with it for too long na may natural na pagpipigil tayo sa pag-accelerate ng RE na in a way there will be some restraint or just some sense of timeliness on the part of the nat gas part of our energy mix para paunahin talaga yung renewable energies. And that's why I'm concerned about timelines and milestones and non-compliance. So lastly about this topic, good sponsor, Mr. President, what measures, therefore, are being taken to prevent regulatory capture by LNG interests that might seek to extend the lifespan of LNG infrastructure beyond the transition period?
Ang by nature, they are intermittent. Baka hindi niya kaya base load. Wala nang support.
Hindi yun ang tanong niya. Ang tanong is, ano yung regulatory capture? So, Mr. President, what is very clear in our current laws and regulation now is that we are prioritizing renewable energy. So to the extent that renewable energy can be pushed, it is being pushed. But let's recognize, and many laymen do not understand this principle, that you cannot, for now, we have not discovered a way to use renewable energy for our base load. So yung choices natin sa base load will not include does not include renewable energy, and that's where LNG comes in. Now, what is the regulatory capture? How do we ensure that hindi to tumagal beyond the timeline that we want to transition into renewable? I go back to the energy plan where there is a specific timeline, and they have the calculations as to how much LNG will go up, because it will still go up. As I said, we are far from producing or not producing, supplying the energy that the whole country needs to support the economic development that we want. So it will go up, but it will go up slower dahil nga ika-capture na sana ni renewable yon. And then let's keep in mind that there are supply agreements that the ERC is required to approve, and they can also come in there. Obviously, if they know na wala nang demand for LNG, o hindi na pwede, then they will not approve a long-term plan. Ganun lang yun. And I think that's what we're already seeing now with the coal. There is a demand because, as I said, there is a continuing need for energy. But I think DOE is trying, I'd like to think that they are trying not to be too dependent on coal. Despite the fact that talaga ang dami pang brownout. It's a tough decision.
Yes, I agree, good sponsor. Thank you for that, Mr. President. And of course, mayaman na sa karanasan yung ERC in particular, and DOE of course, and the attached agencies. Yung pressures din, yung push and pull, even about what should be purely economic forces of supply and demand. Minsan, and this is bahagi ng maraming heartaches and heartbreaks natin about the implementation of the EPIRA, minsan kahit wala nang sasabihin ganyang kataas na demand for a certain energy, because there's a supply, somehow na in a way na distort yung sitwasyon at either kulang yung pag-pushback ng ating energy regulators, or out and out, may mga reklamo ng regulatory capture. And since we know na naging karanasan natin yan from time to time in the past, syempre, on the eve of the dawn of a new transition era of nat gas, gusto nating maiwasan yon. Hindi naman innocents ang ERC et al. They know about these realities sa landscape, and they should be the wisest how to prevent recurrence of this para rin manatiling tapat dun sa Philippine Energy Plan. So just to make that of record, good sponsor, Mr. President, sa susunod kong tanong, what steps is DOE taking to enhance its regulatory framework to effectively manage the energy transition, particularly in terms of balancing LNG development with the growth of renewable energy sources and ensuring grid stability, Mr. President?
I'd like to think I've answered that question, Your Honor.
Okay.
Because the energy plan is the roadmap that is being followed. And so given the energy mix that they seek to achieve, the clear demand for more power, right now, there is a demand for more renewables, there is a demand for more natural gas, and in terms of natural gas being divided between indigenous and LNG, there is a demand for all of that as well. But they do have a few more, they have scenarios, Mr. President, but I can say with certainty that right now, there is so much more demand. And to be clear, Mr. President, the law, the bill actually refers to a comprehensive plan that DOE will provide. This is the Philippine Downstream Natural Gas Distribution Development Plan. And this will contain, among others, information on the distribution systems and virtual transportation systems, including location, construction, operation and maintenance, expansion, modification, rehabilitation, decommissioning, and abandonment, whichever is applicable. The plan shall also include all studies, programs, and policies for the promotion and development of the distribution sector. So I think in addition to the energy plan, ito na ho yung mas detalyadong mga plano na tinatanong ng ating kasamahan na baka it's not yet available in the energy plan. That is why we want to pass this measure to have more details on the natural gas development plan.
Salamat, good sponsor, Mr. President. Totoo, maraming moving parts ito. And with this question, isinama ko na yung part yung grid, no? Ensuring its stability. And dito, syempre, papasok yung nat gas development, and andun na yung ating efforts na yung RE sources ma-upload din, no, sa grid at ma-distribute sa pamamagitan ng grid. Follow-up question to that, how does DOE plan, ito nabanggit na rin natin ng good sponsor kanina about capacity, how does DOE plan to address potential limitations in government capacity to effectively implement and oversee these complex regulatory changes?
Pakiulit yung tanong. How
Sige
does
po.
DOE...
Paano pinaplano ng DOE i-address yung mga potential limitations sa kapasidad ng gobyerno na effectively i-implement, tas mag-exercise ng oversight dito sa mga complex regulatory changes na ito?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Mr. President, we know that we are government run by people. And so I think the first step should be really capacitating our people. And we provide that in section, in the Declaration of Policy. It includes the equipping the necessary technical expertise and skills of personnel in government agencies and the private sector to support the development of the natural gas industry. Kasi kung ako tatanungin nyo, wala talaga akong capacity to implement this. No, I think I understand enough to provide for the policy framework, which is this bill, but we really need technical people. And yeah, we've included that in the bill precisely because we feel that is very important.
Agree. Thank you, good sponsor. And a second follow-up question, what specific measures are being taken to ensure that even grid modernization efforts prioritize renewable energy integration even over LNG flexibility?
Grid modification
Mr. President.
efforts, meron ba? So, Mr. President, to be clear, there is no difference in the capacity of the grid to facilitate power that comes from renewable energy or others. So there is no need to make a specific shift or to prepare for that. Having said that, though, DOE is constantly updating, or at least trying to update themselves and keep themselves abreast with changes in the landscapes in other countries, which makes it easy for us in a way because we can just look at what's happening there, and then also working with the private sector as well.
Thank you, good sponsor. So again, at the proper time during the period of amendments, probably this representation will attempt to propose amendments that will indeed prioritize RE over LNG, even in the grid. Thank you, good sponsor. So huling tanong ko dito sa first part ng interpellation ko. Kanina na pag-usapan din natin, good sponsor, yung tungkol sa investment situation. So there are not too many investment opportunities in the country. For example, we've even been called a manufacturing desert, and real property development appears to be going into stagnation mode for the next 5 years. And of course, it's a crisis when capital has nowhere to go. And we won't be surprised if investors in the gas sector will want to invest more rather than less. So, what specific measures and assessment tools is the DOE implementing to prevent the overbuilding of LNG infrastructure and to protect consumers from the financial burden of potential stranded assets?
I believe we've answered that question, Your Honor. That the DOE has made very clear, and when we pass this bill, it will continue to work with the private sector, the investors, on the demand for renewable based on the targets in the energy plan, and then the use of LNG as a transition fuel. It is in our best interest that we have enough supply. I think that is the most important. As to whether it can be predicted to the exact mix, I think that is highly impossible or improbable. But that is the goal, Mr. President, that there is enough supply. Ang hirap kasing sabihin pag kinulang. So paano? Papasok yung coal. Pareho ho tayong, Mr. President, pareho tayo ng kasamahan natin na hindi masyadong masaya kung coal lang dadagdag. So syempre magpupush talaga tayo dun sa transition fuel hanggat hindi pa kakayanin ng renewable. So DOE has those guidelines in place, and I think the most that they can do is to really stay on top of be always analyzing the data. And I mean, if things go well for us and there is a boom in our economy, as that is the objective of Create More, which we just passed, the objective of so many bills, even in education, so that we have a vibrant employment sector, and then the demand for energy will continue to increase as predicted, and hopefully we stick to the plan and we don't allow ourselves to be derailed by the availability of both natural gas and other sources because we do want to make the shift to renewables.
Yes, thank you, good sponsor. I guess this representation will continue to think on how to craft proposed amendments regarding this issue, because kung like with any infrastructure, I suppose, halimbawa sa mga syudad natin or even just in our homes, kapag alam natin na meron tayong transition period, we would tend to build yung sakto lang or even minimalistically, dahil ayaw natin na kapag lampas na tayo sa transition period and papasok na tayo sa long term, in this case, a bigger renewable energy share sa energy mix, na burden tayo sa mga hard infra of the transition period, na kapag naging stranded assets ito, ay baka patuloy pang pagkakagastusan ng consumer. So bringing us farther away from rather than nearer to least cost at yun na nga, mas murang kuryente para sa ating mga kababayan. Follow-up question here, how will any assessment tools account for the rapidly declining costs of renewable energy and storage technologies, which could in turn accelerate the obsolescence of LNG infrastructure?
The question is, how would assessment tools, what is that? What follows?
Paano ikikwenta nitong assessment tools yung magmumura na yung RE and storage technologies, at dahil nagmumura ito, baka pabilisin niya na maging laos na yung LNG infrastructure. How will the assessment tools account for this?
I think, Mr. President, like I am not I cannot even consider myself yet an energy expert, but it's very clear to me that the shift will be to renewable, and we are waiting, and we know that there will, as we've seen in everything, there are those moments where suddenly there's new technology that is cheaper. We do expect that to happen, but the demand, as I have kept on repeating, for power is so high in this country that the need for LNG to support renewable will be there for quite a while. And even in 2040, which is when we have that plan to be 50% renewable, there will be still 50%, Mr. President. So medyo malayo hong mangyari yung situation na ang biggest problem natin is mag-overinvest siguro. But it is good that Her Honor points that out, so DOE is aware. But right now, hindi ho tayo pinipilahan. Wala ho tayong exploration. We are even only in the bidding phase, so it is a concern that should still be there in our radar, but it is far from our major concerns.
Okay. Fair enough, good sponsor. Although I would also, this representation would also rather na kahit habang hindi pa tayo pinipilahan, we, the Philippines, set ourselves up as in a way, even if modestly or less modestly, hopefully, a pioneer for RE after a quick transition period. Huling follow-up question ko dito sa huling tanong ko
But
sa...
just for Her
Yes,
Honor's
good sponsor.
own, for her information and her team that clearly is very concerned with renewables, the renewable energy law itself creates a body. It's called the National Renewable Energy Board, and it is their responsibility to monitor and review the implementation of the law, to review technologies. So sila ho ang titingin at magga-guide siguro ng mas detalye sa DOE din to say na, may mga bagong technology, baka yung timeline natin ng pag-shift ng 10 years, 7 years. You know? So all of these things, thankfully, we have passed that law, yung binabanggit ko, batas na yan, and that is in place already.
Thank you, good sponsor. That should really come in helpful dito sa pagbaybay natin sa bill. So yun na nga, huling follow-up question ko dito sa unang bahagi ng interpellation. What specific consumer protection mechanisms are being put in place to shield Filipino consumers from bearing the costs of stranded LNG assets in a scenario in which renewable energy comes to be far more commercially viable even than gas, Mr. President?
I think I've answered that.
Okay.
If with all due respect, I think it boils down to the same question that Her Honor has been asking the last 2 or 3 questions.
Well, I guess beyond the actions of the National Renewable Energy Board, ito namang huling tanong in this part ay yung consumer representation and participation. Pati sa pag-design nitong transition period of nat gas in between the coal. But as a transition, dahil fossil din naman ang nat gas, then papunta sa long-term na renewable energy. And I share the hope of the good sponsor na mas maagang aabot tayo dun sa scenario na yung renewable energy really has a significant or even a dominant share in our energy mix.
Dagdag ko lang,
yes, good
Mr.
sponsor.
President, that this bill includes the creation of a technical committee, and doon sa, kasi Her Honor mentioned consumers, no? So doon sa technical committee, meron tayong representatives from the academe, trade and industry, consumer, to be very specific, professional associations, research institutions, government agency, testing institutions, and other relevant sectors. This can be found in Section 5.
Thank you, good sponsor. So, good sponsor, Mr. President, I'm 1/3 of the way through in my interpellation. Gusto ba ng good sponsor ipagpatuloy natin or mag-suspend muna
No, we are
ako?
continuing because we
Okay
have
po.
a timeline, I think, that has been discussed with the leadership. So we are happy to continue for as long as Her Honor has questions.
All
Thank
right,
you.
salamat po, good sponsor, Mr. President. So, itong midway na note, as we continue to examine the Philippines' energy strategy, it's crucial to maintain a laser focus on the ultimate goal, a sustainable, renewable energy future. While LNG may play a transitional role, we must be vigilant against the risks of over-reliance on this fossil fuel. So the following questions delve deeper into the technical, economic, and regulatory challenges of integrating LNG into our energy mix while prioritizing renewable energy development. So these inquiries address critical concerns such as the potential still for stranded assets, the need for flexible infrastructure, and the importance of robust environmental safeguards. They also explore the delicate balance between short-term energy security and sustainability goals, always with an eye towards maintaining the Philippines' competitiveness in a rapidly evolving global energy landscape. So, getting a bit more, but not too technical naman, Mr. President, good sponsor, how is DOE planning to incorporate the potentials of hydrogen and ammonia into its long-term energy strategy? And what legislative measures are being considered to facilitate the development and integration of these technologies in the Philippines? I understand that the regulations for gas in Australia, for example, include provisions for regulations and support systems for hydrogen, for which ammonia is a pathway fuel for hydrogen deployment in retrofitted gas plants. So ito parang post-nat gas era na nila, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I quickly conferred with DOE, and they're familiar with this, but with all due respect, it's no longer covered by the scope of this bill. So if Her Honor won't mind, either she can directly relate it to this bill, because we're here to answer, but this in particular about their plans, like if Her Honor asks about nuclear, I'll also say the same thing. It's not the scope of this bill if we talk about, but to the extent that we talk about the energy mix, then of course I will just give my answer about the Philippine Energy Plan. So, but do note that we've referred it to the DOE, and they will be happy to provide response if Her Honor would like to discuss that at another time.
Thank you, good sponsor. That's enough for me for now to be able to discuss this further with the DOE. Noting lang na it's also related to my first or one of my first questions about comparing and contrasting yung plano natin to get to RE through gas, comparing with yung nagiging proseso sa ibang mga bansa, which is also why I mentioned Australia. All right, since my follow-up questions are about hydrogen and ammonia technologies and about blue hydrogen from LNG, if the good sponsor won't mind, I'll just put them on record, tapos i-follow up na lang ng office ko sa DOE. One follow-up question is, how will the department ensure that investments in hydrogen and ammonia technologies don't divert resources from more immediate and cost-effective renewable energy solutions? And what safeguards are being put in place to prevent the development of blue hydrogen from LNG, which could extend fossil fuel dependence? So, dako na ako sa susunod na tanong. What specific design criteria and technologies should the DOE mandate for new LNG facilities to ensure maximum flexibility and, nabanggit na rin ng good sponsor kanina, cost-effective decommissioning or even repurposing, considering the uncertain future of gas in the Philippine energy mix, Mr. President?
Can you repeat the first part of the question? Because
Certainly.
I was noting the last part, you mentioned the decommissioning, but the first
Yes.
part?
Certainly, good sponsor. So, anong specific design criteria at saka technologies ang dapat i-mandate ng department para sa bagong LNG facilities, para siguruhin yung maximum flexibility nila?
So, Mr. President, I will refer Her Honor to the bill and the declaration of policy,
Okay.
which states that it is the policy of the state to provide a conducive industry environment for the promotion and development of the PDNGI, which is the natural gas industry, through the issuance of regulatory policies, the localized codes and standards for products, facilities, and its operations based on the Philippine national standards and plans and programs. So it is clear that that is the responsibility of DOE, no? And I don't have the details, that will not be contained here in this measure. But Section 18 also refers to the compliance with standards. The DOE shall ensure that permit holders and participants, products, facilities, services, and systems comply with the standards set by relevant government agencies in terms of quality, design, efficiency, safety, structural integrity, and operation and maintenance. Regulation shall be consistent with applicable Philippine and internationally accepted natural gas industry standards. So, hindi naman ho tayo papayag na yung ipapatayo dito substandard o di kaya turn of the century 2000, di ba? Dapat yung bago. So that is what we can assure Her Honor, and we've provided very clearly in the bill that these are the standards that we will follow, international standards, Mr. President.
Thank you, good sponsor. Pwedeng-pwede nga, dun sa Section 18, pumasok pa yung mga aspeto ng design criteria at saka technologies. And following on one of my earlier questions, baka dito rin sa section on compliance with standards, pwedeng pumasok yung kung mas magiging proactive pa ang DOE sa anong klaseng, ano yung forma nung transition period ang mas gusto nila, including in terms of storage, for example, ay yun na nga, baka mas pwedeng ma-push ng DOE yung mas sa halip na land-based, mas floating, at least or a mix of FSRUs and land-based storage facilities, leaning more towards the floating facilities. Na ayon sa literature, mas madaling i-decommission at mas madali ring i-repurpose. Halimbawa, dun sa nabanggit kong ilang mga bansa pa, which are using nat gas as a transition, pero towards fuller RE future. So follow-up questions, if the good sponsor would care to comment on them further, perhaps in relation to Section 18, how will these design criteria impact the overall cost of LNG infrastructure, and what measures are in place to prevent these costs from being passed on to consumers, Mr. President?
What is Her Honor's question? What are the designs?
Ano yung impact nitong design criteria sa overall na presyo ng LNG infrastructure? At paano mapigilan ma-pass on yung cost na yon sa consumers?
Well, our law provides for reasonable cost only, Mr. President. So, syempre, kung magdi-design naman sila ng facility na sobra-sobra naman sa pangangailangan, hindi na yun reasonable cost. Hindi na nila pwedeng i-recover. I think that standard is clearly set in our law, in the bill, that will be the, not just guide, but that is the standard that we are setting.
Salamat, good sponsor. And what specific repurposing options are being considered for LNG infrastructure? And how feasible are they in supporting a renewable energy future? Kung meron ng repurposing options.
Repurposing po saan? From what to what? Ano yung...
Repurposing ng LNG infrastructure.
I know, repurposing from what to what? LNG to something else?
Yes. Kung tapos na yung transition through LNG and papunta na talaga dun sa fuller RE future, meron na bang repurposing options na kino-consider sa LNG infra?
It appears that for now, they are not aware of a specific repurposing, I don't know what you call it, technology or plan. But I'm guessing, like anything else in life, something will appear. There might be something, but as of now, wala pa silang na-encounter. I've asked them to also check if there's such a thing in other countries. Like if Her Honor recalls, I had mentioned that there's a shift to nuclear from natural gas in other countries after they saw what happened in Ukraine and then nagtaasan yung presyo. So pwede ho tayong magtanong doon kung yung kanilang LNG facilities napalitan nila to nuclear. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I do know that nuclear is very, very specific. So baka LNG to nuclear hindi mangyayari. But LNG to renewable, medyo wala pa silang clear, wala pa silang nakikitang ganon. But Her Honor's questions are noted, and they will also check if there are examples of that in other countries.
Thank you very much for that, good sponsor. And I think it's only fair nga that DOE will begin to look into that kung hindi pa nila nagagawa. Dahil nga, sinasabi nila, transition para sa atin ang nat gas and papunta pa rin sa RE. So, parang thinking forward, I mean, the good sponsor is the chair of the Futures Thinking Committee, or still is, right? Good sponsor.
No longer.
Was.
But,
Okay.
but Her
Opo.
Honor, I thank you for mentioning it because I continue to be a strong supporter of futures thinking, and all of Her Honor's questions should be taken into account by our agencies, because these are valid concerns that will have to be faced in the future.
Salamat, good sponsor. So, I appreciate the pioneering work that the good sponsor had done in that committee, and napaalalahanan ako nun dito sa pangangailangan sana na since nat gas is proposed as a transition papunta sa RE future, na pati yung mga hardware, yung mga infra natin ay pag-isipan na natin kung papaano yun na nga i-repurpose o i-redesign para hindi siya sayang, hindi siya maging white elephant lamang, at lalo na kung pagbabayarin pa ng ating mga consumers ay dahil patuloy pa rin namang pinakikinabangan even in that RE future. So, sa susunod kong tanong, how is DOE planning to integrate the growth of intermittent renewable energy sources? So, nabanggit din ng good sponsor kanina. But how integrate the growth of these intermittent RE sources with LNG-powered generation to ensure grid stability? And what role does DOE envision for energy storage technologies in this integration, Mr. President?
That's currently being done already. We all know, well, no, we don't all know, but those in the industry know that RE is intermittent. And so it is already being integrated because hindi talaga siya maasahan sa baseload. So as we speak, natural gas is already contributing to the baseload, and intermittent, for intermittent sources, dun ho pumapasok ang renewable. That is our situation right now.
Salamat, good sponsor. It must be a real challenge also for DOE na dahil yung isang end goal din nila ay grid stability. So in a way, that's a quantitative goal, and yung intermittence ng RE sources may be thought of as a quantitative problem, pero qualitatively, gustong-gusto natin yan. So it must be an interesting, certainly an important challenge for DOE or for NGCP for that matter, na yung magiging LNG-powered generation na maaring i-argue nila ay mas stable, paano pagsasabayin sa grid with the more desirable, longer term, or sabihin natin more strategic na RE sources, kahit intermittent siya. So how will, by way of follow-up, how will DOE ensure that the flexibility provided by LNG doesn't become a crutch that slows down investments in more sustainable grid stabilization technologies like battery storage?
I think I've answered that question, Your Honor. The energy plan, the Philippine Energy Plan, is to transition to renewables. But as Her Honor has just said less than a minute ago, this is an intermittent source, and so we have to rely on the sources that can provide for the base load. And if we look at what is being done now, that is exactly what will continue to happen probably in the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you, good sponsor. I guess yung battery storage na, yun na nga, sa solar energy front, nakita natin yung improvements in that technology
But
in
it
the
is
past
still, but
years.
it is still
Yes, good sponsor?
far. It is still very far from. I'm very excited about it, but I had, that's one of the very first questions I asked in my briefing as chairman, and malayo pa yung ability natin to capture that storage. But yes, we are as hopeful as Her Honor in seeing that happen sooner than later.
I'm glad about that, good sponsor. Yung shared hope na gano'n dahil kahit papano, bagamat maaring hindi pa kaagad na mafu-fully realize yan, breakthrough na rin yung teknolohiya sa battery storage for solar energy, no, among other REs. At kung pwede ngang intervention yung battery storage na yan para gawing sustainable or gawing stable ang grid kahit habang sinasampahan ng mga intermittent but desirable because more sustainable na renewable energies, na sana bumilis at hindi bumagal yung investments dyan dahil baka nagkaroon ng parang learned dependence on LNG. And
Well, if I may
yes,
add,
good sponsor.
in a way, and to just point out to Her Honor how much I share her concern, parang ganun din ang nangyayari sa atin, di ba? Nagkakaroon din tayo ng dependence sa coal kasi gustuhin man nating mga environmental advocates na mag-shift na kaagad, sasabihin sa atin na kasi mas mura to o kasi intermittent din yung supply. So that's why for now, we feel like our best option is itong transition fuel, but I take Her Honor's concerns very seriously na hindi naman tayo dyan maging dependent. In the same way, we don't want to see the dependence on the non-renewables because it will derail our transition. So I am with Her Honor 100%.
Maraming salamat para doon, good sponsor. huling follow-up dito sa topic na to, what measures are being taken to prioritize demand response and other smart grid technologies that can support renewable integration without relying on fossil fuels?
The one you just showed me. Well, Her Honor, the number one response to that question is the priority dispatch. The law we have in place requires that renewable must be dispatched first. So yun na talaga. I mean,
Okay.
marami pa tayong pwedeng isipin. Of course, I can talk about more awareness, more campaigns, and other programs, but that is the number one step being taken. And then we have the Green Energy Auction Program, the Renewable Portfolio Standards, the Offshore Wind Policy Framework. But this, at the end of the day, build mo lahat yan, pero walang priority dispatch, di wala rin hong mangyayari. So I think I'll stick to that first answer as the most important step being taken.
Maraming salamat. Most important talaga po, good sponsor. And the good sponsor's response highlights yung gano'ng ka-importante yung oversight function na ine-exercise natin sa Kongreso, that all of these ecological and energy laws, no, the ecology and the energy mandates coexisting in each of these laws, dapat talaga mapatupad in any energy reforms, including trying to see our way through a nat gas transition to an RE future. And what comprehensive measures is the DOE implementing to ensure that the entire LNG supply chain in the Philippines, from import terminals to end use, will meet or exceed potential future international standards for methane emission control? Mr. President.
I've read into the record, Your Honor, the existing provision that we have in this bill that requires that we comply with international energy standards, Mr. President. International standards, regulatory standards.
All right. Salamat, good sponsor. Before we reach the period of amendments, tignan ko ulit kung yung buong LNG supply chain na yon reflected na dun sa compliance natin with those international standards here in our bill. Susunod na tanong ko po.
I'll just clarify
yes, good
if
sponsor.
Her Honor doesn't mind, no?
Yes.
Her Honor often refers to LNG, but let's be clear that we
Just
are also
nat
going
gas.
to regulate
All
natural
right.
gas. So that when I affirm what Her Honor is saying, that also it means that we are using the same high standards, whether it's natural gas, imported gas, or indigenous.
Thank you, good sponsor. But Mr. President, the good sponsor will kindly forgive this representation if maya't maya I shift between talking with her about nat gas and LNG kasi alam naman natin na in transporting nat gas, necessarily nako-convert siya by a certain scientific process into LNG, and then that's where the regasification comes in at a later stage, kahit dun sa storage, kaya napag-uusapan yung FSRUs, where the R is the regasification nga po.
But to be clear,
yes, good sponsor.
But to be clear, for indigenous natural gas, because of the existing pipelines that were built, there is no more regasification. So it is not LNG. That's why I have to clarify that it is gas. It is not being transported as liquid gas, and there's also no regasification involved. So that's why the more generic term is just not gas. But obviously, if we're referring to imported gas, unless we're importing it from a place that is close enough to build pipelines, then and some will argue, which we will disagree, that any country is close enough, then that's the only time that it is LNG.
Understood. Good sponsor. But in any case, in whatever state of matter it is, gas man siya, o liquid man siya, in the case of kung may imported, yung basic na kumbaga chemical structure niya ay yun. So,
Correct, but I
yes,
just
good
wanted
sponsor.
to make the clarification because when Her Honor refers to, let's say, a certain standard and dapat ganito tayo sa LNG, then I'm even taking that statement further to say
Yes.
that covered din dyan yung indigenous nat gas kasi
Yes.
hindi siya LNG.
Okay.
Just to be clear, if years from now somebody quotes takes a look at our journal, in most cases, the standards, the regulations will cover both all kinds of gas, unless, of course, it's just referring to that particular state, which is the liquid nat gas.
Yes. Thank you, good sponsor. Further follow-up questions, and kaya medyo kinukulit ko ito, good sponsor, pasensya na, because nat gas is essentially methane, as we all know, and it's even worse than carbon dioxide. So given the significant climate impact of any methane leaks, how will these emission control measures be independently verified and enforced, Mr. President?
This is where our provision that we've spread into the record comes in, because the DOE is guided by international standards, and all of the investors, all of the bidders will have to comply with those international standards. If they are followed, then the chances of leakages is extremely low. So for so long as the methane emissions are well managed, it is really it is not problematic and does not contribute to global warming. But again, the devil is in the details, so those high
Yes.
standards must be maintained. And it is truly our hope that we only deal with these companies, these investors that have high track records, but those are part of the requirements of DOE. And I welcome Her Honor's earlier suggestion that we exercise our oversight committee,
Yes.
oversight function, to ensure that these high standards that we expect to be honored are put in place. And then to add
Yes.
also, Mr. President, we are creating in this bill an interagency health, safety, security, and environment inspection and monitoring team. And this is composed of co-chaired by DOE and the DNR, and then its member government agencies are the Maritime Industry Authority, the Philippine Coast Guard, the Department of Labor and Employment, Bureau of Fire Protection, Department of Health, and other relevant government agencies.
Thank you, good sponsor. So yung mga bodies na i-create din nung bill natin will really be very important also nga in terms of these emission control measures. Kasi any methane leaks would contribute further to global warming. And kung yung mga baka nga, di ba, sa agrikultura, sa animal husbandry, sinasabing nakakadagdag sa overall methane in our atmosphere, ano pa kaya ang higit na high-tech na industriya tulad ng nat gas sa ating energy sector? And how do these methane control measures factor into the overall cost-benefit analysis of nat gas versus RE sources, Mr. President?
The standards that are required to ensure safety when it comes to methane leakages are already part of the cost, the total cost incurred by the investor. So that's what they're prepared to. There would be no what do you call it? No investment. What do you call it? There would be no award to them if that was not taken into consideration. And then when Her Honor is asking for a comparison with renewables, well, with renewables, I'm not aware that is the issue, that there's a similar issue, but in terms of proper disposal of the end-of-life equipment, like of the solar panels, nandyan din yun. Kasama din
Yes.
talaga lahat yan.
Totoo, good sponsor. Although of course in terms of RE, kahit when we have to think about the decommissioning nung kung anumang mga equipment nila, hindi kasama sa mga problema doon yung methane control. And after all, and I'm glad na factored in na sa cost-benefit analysis, pati ng private sector investors ito, dahil in the same way na, in fact, yung major energy players natin sa fossil fuels or even sa coal, certainly sa petroleum, in fact, are also pioneers in the RE sector. And sila rin yung magpa-pioneer dito sa nat gas transition. So, it's good to know na factor in nila sa cost-benefit analysis nila. They can compare and contrast even in their own operations yung cost-benefit ng nat gas vis-a-vis RE, and see how in each of these stages, and I would say, and I'm guessing the good sponsor might also say, na dun sa strategic phase ng RE Future, mas sulit yung cost-benefit analysis overall. I have two related points, good sponsor. Maybe I'll just put them on the record before going on to my next question. Just welcoming if the good sponsor would care to comment on either of these. One is that, nabanggit ko na rin pahapyaw kanina, the Philippines is signatory to the Paris Agreement, and our NDCs committed a 75% reduction in GHG emissions. Now, nat gas is fossil and in fact is more toxic than other fuels according to scientists. So do we therefore, through this proposed new law, declare that nat gas or LNG for that matter is really the safer and cleaner type of fossil fuel? And will the Senate agree to become party to the institutionalization or harmonization of these contested claims? And my second last point on this topic, inviting any comments from the good sponsor, relatedly, ang PDNGI ba ay magdadala sa atin papalapit or lalo lang tayong mapapalayo sa ating reduction target? Totoo ba, Department of Energy, na aabot sa 35 nat gas or LNG plants ang planong itayo sa iba't ibang panig ng bansa? Saan-saan ang mga ito? At maari bang malaman kung alin ang nat gas o LNG terminal lamang at alin naman ang gas-fired power plant, Mr. President? If the good sponsor or DOE through our good sponsor would care to comment on these last 2 points.
I'll just make a comment, Mr. President, on something I've put on record before, no? But
Yes.
this is basically coming from the United Nations Environmental Program. Natural gas is a cleaner fuel in the sense that burning it produces fewer conventional air pollutants like sulfur dioxide and particulates from burning coal or oil. So that is coming from the UN Environment Program. As to Her Honor's other questions on
Locations
for
of the plants,
DOE,
good sponsor. Opo.
we'll just ask DOE to submit.
Thank you for that, good sponsor. Dahil ngayon palang may concerns na halimbawa sa pag-operate or pagtatayo ng mga bagong nat gas or LNG plants dun sa mga environmentally sensitive na lugar natin. Halimbawa dun sa bandang Verde Island Passage na center of biodiversity, hindi lang sa ating bansa pero sa buong mundo. And just to make of record also, I'm aware of the earlier UNEP articles about nat gas, but these were followed by later UNEP articles na reviewing their own earlier pronouncements about how clean really or how safe really is nat gas. And UNEP pedaled back on their earlier claims that nat gas is that much cleaner and that much safer. So all the more, lending urgency na pang-transition lang talaga siya. Hindi siya pang long-term. And I guess the shorter the transition, the better para umabot sa RE future. So, okay, kanina na simula naming pag-usapan ng good sponsor yung, or nabanggit namin yung price. So, how is DOE factoring in geopolitical risks and potential price volatility in its long-term energy planning? And what strategies are being considered to mitigate these risks and ensure price stability for consumers?
That question I've answered many times during the interpellation, but I'm very happy
Alright.
to repeat it because we have a chart that we often show, and either we can give Her Honor a copy or if there's time to show it here, where it shows that precisely because natural gas price can be volatile, the chart shows that because you have indigenous gas, that is what provides stability in pricing. So until we can provide Her Honor with that copy, which we have, I'm just going to make gestures with my hand. If you look at the prices of nat gas, it was going up and down, and then it really went up during the time of when the Ukraine war started. But if you look at the price of indigenous gas, it was very stable here. So that is precisely why we are pushing for more support and the creation of a really strong natural gas development, which will be prioritizing indigenous gas.
Thank you, good sponsor, and this representation looks forward to the information that she will share regarding this
There,
question.
That's it.
Yes,
So
good
the red
sponsor.
line is the price of natural gas.
Nat gas.
And the blue line, which is quite stable, is the price of indigenous gas. So repeatedly during the, not Her Honor's interpellation, the other interpellations, when the questions keep going back about nat gas being very volatile, kaya nga ho tayong may sariling atin, para nga may energy security tayo. This is what will provide us with energy security, indigenous gas.
Thank you, good sponsor.
And the record speaks for itself. That's also what I wanted to emphasize. It's not a prediction. This is the record. The dates here are is this 20 years?
2017, 14, 10, 2010.
2010 until
Ah,
2024.
Yes, Mr. President, the minority leader would like to
Very,
interject.
very interesting graph, Mr. President, with the permission of our sponsor. So yung LNG, ano bang color yung mustard, yata, o orange. Orange, that would be now the cost of the power from the point of view of the consumer generated by imported natural gas. So that includes now freight plus the regasification niya. Twice, di ba? The regasification would be 2 times. Regasification would be once, but the liquefaction, yes, would also be 1 pa.
So that already includes the red line already includes the regasification. The cost
Oo.
of regasification kasama na.
Oh, hindi, gas siya. So, liquefy siya, tapos transport siya, at rinigasify siya. And that's the yellow line. That's the orange line.
Yes.
Yes. So, from July 2019 to July 2020, it was even lower than the indigenous natural gas, Mr. President. Is that how we interpret it? Na meron din siyang point in time, mas mura pa siya, even with liquefaction, freight, and regasification. Is that correct?
Yes, once in a while. But,
once in a while,
but to emphasize, if you look at over 14 years, it's a very, very
Yes,
small
yes.
window.
Sige po. And then meron pa lang recently, mga January 2024, meron din po. So, I'm just asking for help to interpret the chart. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Minority Leader. And
if I
yes,
may also
good
add,
sponsor.
that is precisely why the industry practice is to have long-term agreements because you also want to secure the best price. And that's really how it is with commodities, no? Ang lamang lang natin dito is not only is in the 14 years, not only is indigenous gas cheaper by far most of the times over the 14-year span, but there is revenue that goes back to the government. So we just want to emphasize that. Plus the fact of energy security. And when we say revenues that goes back to the government, idagdag pa natin doon yung savings on foreign exchange. Kasi that's another factor. Hindi tayo vulnerable sa mga foreign exchange rate changes. And then with energy security, we have more control than gas that is coming from other countries. Because like the example that I mentioned in one of the interpellations is that some countries, some suppliers just unilaterally canceled their supply contract was it Pakistan? I keep forgetting what country. Was it Pakistan? And they were left, like they endured major power disruptions because they were just so vulnerable. So I end with saying that I don't think there's a price you can put on energy security.
Thank you, good sponsor. Just to make of record, follow-up questions about this, about the price of nat gas or LNG. Just to reflect continuing concerns, no? How does the inherent price volatility of nat gas or LNG compare to the long-term price stability offered by RE sources in the department's risk assessments? And what measures, and these are my last two follow-up questions for this second part of my interpellation, what measures are being taken to ensure that the costs of mitigating nat gas or LNG price volatility don't hinder investments in more stable RE sources? Mr. President, if the good sponsor would care to comment on those 2 points.
So I think what I'm getting from the resource persons are fairly stable ang renewable energy prices, which is good for us because that is the shift that we eventually, that is the direction that we're going into. The issue that we have with renewable is really that we do not have the capacity to store it, and for now it does not also, it cannot provide for the baseload. So that is the bigger issue, not that the prices are volatile. So if we can solve the storage and the baseload issue, then we are well on our way to having more renewable sources of energy.
Thank you, good sponsor. So as an opening point on my final third of my interpellation, as we approach the final set of questions, it's crucial to maintain our focus on the ultimate goal of transitioning to a sustainable, renewable energy future. These inquiries delve into the intricate challenges of balancing short-term energy security with environmental and economic sustainability goals. We must remain vigilant against the risks of over-investing in LNG infrastructure that could become stranded assets, potentially burdening consumers and hindering our competitiveness in a rapidly evolving global energy landscape. So the following last questions address critical issues such as consumer protection, regulatory oversight, and the development of local expertise. They also explore the delicate balance between leveraging international knowledge and fostering domestic capabilities, always with an eye towards ensuring that our energy transition serves the best interests of the Filipino people and positions the Philippines as a leader in RE adoption. Mr. President, good sponsor, I'm able to skip my first 2 questions in this last part since they've already been discussed by the good sponsor and me in the earlier part of my interpellation. So I will go to my last 3 questions for this interpellation. Good sponsor, what specific emergency supply measures and contingency plans is the DOE developing to maintain energy security during the transition period from Malampaya gas to a more diverse energy mix, including nat gas or LNG and renewables, considering that Malampaya supplies most of Luzon's plants, and neither renewable supplies nor nat gas import
Next year, di ba?
facilities will be
Meron na yun.
instantly
Next year,
ready to
mapoproduce
take
na
up
yung
the
isang
slack, Mr. President.
Next year, ano pa? So, as I've reported in the previous interpellation, there is a well that is already being drilled now, and it will already be able to supply next year. That's still part of Malampaya, so that's one. Sorry, next year yung drilling. Sorry, the drilling will start next year, and the production will start 2026. Okay.
Yes.
So that's one. And then second is, again, we just go back to the mix. We are still importing LNG. There is absolutely no intention in this bill to limit the importation of LNG. Of course, this representation is a big supporter of indigenous, but repeatedly we have said that our indigenous supply, even if we start drilling in addition to the Malampaya well that will produce by 2026, another 4 to 7 years will be the earliest production of another, if there's another discovery. And so we still have the LNG and the rest of the mix. It's still there.
Thank you, good sponsor. Medyo nakaka-tense din yung papasukan nating sitwasyon. It really will call on all of DOEs and the attached agencies' capacities na itawid tayo ng maayos through the transition and towards the RE future. How do these emergency measures, or in fact, they don't sound like emergency measures lang, they sound like strategic measures, if you can call them that, even during a transition. How do these emergency measures compare in terms of cost effectiveness and environmental impact to alternatives such as demand response programs or increased investment in energy storage, Mr. President?
What does Your Honor? I've asked the experts. No, what does what demand response programs are Her Honor is Her Honor referring to?
Okay. Ito, which ones in particular? Which demand response programs in particular? Sorry.
Ano yung sinabi niya? Demand response and
Okay.
Hindi, ang sa
Okay.
akin niya is-
Good sponsor, I'll get back to you on which particular demand response programs. Pero I think we can pick up the question from the increased investment in energy storage. So how will this compare in terms of cost effectiveness and environmental impact dun sa emergency measures that we've discussed so far, Mr. President?
Ba't sila yung hindi napapasok kasi ang mahal-mahal pa. Kaya nga,
Okay.
From what we know, Mr. President, the situation with the storage for renewables has not really improved much. There are discoveries, but I'm told that they're in the developmental stage. So our desire is that they will be ready for production and that they will be reasonably cost. But right now, there's no way to compare because, from my understanding, they're not really commercially available.
So I guess DOE has to accelerate bringing the first crack in terms of storage, for example, for solar energies
No, it's not
forward?
DOE, Mr. President. It's the investors in the because
Okay.
sila ho yung nagpo-produce nun eh.
Okay.
So and it's not DOE. I mean, I wish we were in a country dito papasok yung mga investments natin sa DOST. Sa if we can, but I'm guessing that other countries are way ahead of us in trying to develop this technology. So yeah, I'd like a piece of the pie in being a pioneer in that technology, but I think others are ahead of us, and there is not really anything commercially viable yet that will drastically change the landscape for now, Mr. President.
Okay. And then, one last time with this question, once more with feeling, what steps are being taken to ensure that these emergency measures, again, don't become a crutch that slows down the transition to a more resilient, RE-based energy system, Mr. President?
I think I've answered that question, Your Honor. Even Your Honor knows, I think, when you're reading the question that I've answered that.
All right. But I guess we have to think out further how the transition doesn't become a permanent period and really eases the transition.
There is a
to the
transition
RE
plan, Your Honor.
future. Yes, Mr.
I
President.
think,
good
I
sponsor.
think, Your Honor and Your Honor, this representation would be both extremely disappointed if there was no transition plan. There is a transition plan, and I think what we can do as the legislative body with our oversight capacity is check how it's moving along, maybe every 2 years, every 3 years.
Yes, that's a good idea, good sponsor. Thank you. To my next question, what strategies is the DOE implementing to promote technology transfer and build local capacity in the nat gas sector? And how will these efforts be balanced with the need for international expertise in the short term? And I ask this good sponsor because just as we don't want to be dependent on the Chinese for running the national grid, we also don't want to be dependent on U.S. experts who have been engaged with the DOE to always be at hand to keep the nat gas or LNG subsector running, Mr. President.
Well, on one hand, I'm very excited to share that when I visited the Malampaya platform, I saw with my own eyes, and I was told that our human resources are very much coveted in other countries, and that's something that cannot be replaced by a computer, by a textbook, because these are humans that need to operate this platform. And if the sad scenario, which I believe we will not go there, especially if we pass this bill, is if Malampaya ends up closing its operations and there are no other new drillings going on, we will lose these remarkable, well-trained individuals, no? Because even up to now, they're being pirated, they're in demand in other countries. And if I remember right, they're actually sharing, tayo nga yung nag-share nung ating knowledge with them because that is how highly skilled they are, Malampaya having been operational for quite a few years. So that is technology, that is skills that we have learned, and now it is 100% Filipino-run platform. It's something to really be proud of. So not transfer na talaga yung technology. So if we can replicate, we should, not if we can. The goal is to replicate that in all future drilling operations and development that will occur. And also to add, in the bill in Section 12, we empowered DOST to undertake scientific and technological research and development for the improvement of new technologies in the natural gas industry.
Thank you, good sponsor. Nabanggit din nga ng good sponsor yung challenge ng pirating or piracy. In fact, by way of follow-up, ERC can't even retain its lawyers and technical staff today. So, given the limited lifespan of nat gas as a transition fuel, how will we ensure that investments in nat gas-specific skills and technologies and regulatory capacities don't create a workforce and infrastructure bottleneck for the renewable energy transition? So pati yung workforce at infrastructure nga natin, marirepurpose beyond nat gas into the ER future.
Well, the lifespan of a Filipino worker is about 30 to 40 years. And
40.
like we have said, by 2040, we want to have 50% renewable. So there's still 50% out there. So if they started working 10 years ago, in 2040, that's plus 16, so that's 26 years. May trabaho pa rin naman sila after that. And then it's going to be a new generation. So all of this, I think, will work well with us. We have a robust and young human resource population. But yeah, I mean, I think what the bill has tried to create is this environment. Well, what we tried to do is write down the policy that will create an environment that will show the world, the investors, that there is opportunity for investment in natural gas in the Philippines. We need to be confident about that, and that would mean that it goes beyond 2040. To be very clear about it, I have no intention of deceiving anyone that by after 2040 we are purely renewable. Even in Her Honor's best case, in Her Honor's question, this representation's response is that in the different scenarios that DOE put together, they are looking at 70% renewable by 2050. So that's 26 years away, and then there will still be non-renewables in the mix.
But of course, in the ideal future that I think both the good sponsor and I are dreaming about, just as we want to phase out fossils and coal especially, that there be a future we can reach, or our children at least can reach, and their children, pati nat gas, na phase out na as a transition and more fully RE talaga. And as the good sponsor and I were discussing earlier, yung repurposing ng infra, we can also begin to imagine that for our workforce kasi kahit ngayon uso na yung upskilling and reskilling. So we could begin to plan for that, both for our nat gas workforce in terms of reskilling for them to become part eventually of an RE workforce. And what measures are being taken to ensure that technology transfer agreements with international nat gas companies don't lock the Philippines into proprietary technologies that could hinder future flexibility?
I'm imagining that in the agreements that will be entered into by the Philippines and consortiums, they will use the best technology available. We will rely on DOE to ensure as much flexibility and room for growth as far as this is concerned. But like any technology, of course, I think it's a given that the investor would expect that there is sufficient time to make use of said technology. But I think in this day and age, and I'd be very happy, I'd be very curious, in fact, to look at sample agreements on how they treat these technologies. Because obviously, if there's a way that you can produce the gas more efficiently, it is in the best interest of the investor to invest in those technologies. So, but Her Honor's concern is well taken, and DOE is duly notified of this concern.
Thank you very much, good sponsor. So just to my last two shorter questions for today, for tonight. Ito nabanggit din namin ng good sponsor kanina on the absorptive capacity of different agencies. Matatanong talaga, kaya pa ba DOE? Kaya ba ERC? Kasi sa tuwing magkikita tayo sa mga hearings, parang kulang na lang na sabihin ng department o ng commission na hirap na kayo sa kasalukuyang industriya. Sa NGCP, GENCOS at DIUS pa lang ay halos sumuko na yung dalawang ahensya. And here, we're establishing an entirely new industry in which none of the department or the commission, or very few among them, within them, have solid experience and competence. So new transmission and distribution systems will be built with more nat gas terminals and gas plants to be accounted for to comply with the highest standards that the department itself and the commission itself will need to establish, including through this bill. So I wonder if the good sponsor has any comment on that before I go to my last question.
So, Mr. President, in our bill, we established that DOE can create offices and appoint personnel as may be necessary to efficiently and effectively implement this act. And then we have a similar provision, Mr. President, for ERC. Because and just for the record, we agree with her Honor's observations. In our preliminary meetings with both DOE and ERC, they are really in need of personnel and qualified personnel, Mr. President.
And maybe they wouldn't mind a bit of hand-holding from Congress in thinking about the policies also in terms of the capacity building or absorptive capacity with this new industry. So to my last question for this interpellation, good sponsor, Mr. President, on the revenue side, magkano ang kikitain ng gobyerno sa industriyang ito? Hindi kaya ito ay maging negosyo lamang para sa iilan at bulsa din lang nila ang mas makikinabang katulad ng nangyari sa NGCP, Mr. President?
So, Mr. President, we have the numbers for the revenues that the Philippine government has generated from the investment in Malampaya. The total figure is over almost $3 billion US dollars. Sorry. Over $3 billion was invested in Malampaya. And the...
Over 13 billion
Ay, sorry.
13.
I'm referring to the investment, sorry.
Yes.
Amount remitted by Malampaya to the government is $13 billion. Yes, roughly $600 million annually. So that's just for Malampaya. So if you assume that we will have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more, then you just have to multiply that number.
All right. Salamat, good sponsor. So this is the value in absolute numbers. And of course, it doesn't talk yet about the distribution in terms of the participation. So these are the remittances to government. It would be interesting to compare how much those who remitted also made on their end, because syempre, when we think about a sustainable and renewable energy future, bukod nga dun sa revenue sa gobyerno, in a way, there's a bigger spread of share in the wealth created than we have seen so far in our energy sector, whether we're talking about the classic coal and fossil fuel situation, or ito ngayong napipintong era ng nat gas transition. We would like to move forward to an RE future na in a way mas may equitability din, or mas may equitable distribution of the proceeds of the industry. So yun po ang mga tanong ko. Maraming salamat sa good sponsor for hearing and responding to my questions. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you very much to Her Honor for the very insightful questions and observations, and we look forward to the amendments that Her Honor will be making. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ontiveros and Senator Pia. Majority Floor Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we suspend
Mr.
consideration of...
President?
Yes.
Mr. President, as far as this representation knows, there's no other reservation for interpellation, and therefore we move for the
Yes,
President.
Minority Floor Leader.
Let me just reserve my right to ask questions tomorrow.
Of course.
Yes,
During the
and
period of amendment.
it will definitely be a short interpellation, Mr. President, because after the exhaustive interpellation of Senators Gatchalian and Ontiveros. So, and then we can proceed to, so I don't think there will be any damage.
But may I move to close the period of interpellation without prejudice to asking questions during the period? Because we're ready, Mr. President. We've asked those who've listed to interpellate since 2 weeks ago to prepare their amendments. We've been discussing with them, and I think it's been the practice. And I don't abuse this power, but I think it's.
What's
We
the,
waited.
I don't see any practical value, Mr. President. We keep this in the interpellation period, resume tomorrow. There'll be a brief interpellation, then we close it, then we have amendments. Ms. Yes?
What we usually do, with all due respect, dear colleagues, if there's really, if there has been lengthy discussions, which I believe there has been, without prejudice, Mr. President, and the minority floor leader knows that I am very accepting of answering questions. I don't shorten. I stay as long as the questions have to be made. But just to move it forward, Mr. President, and we've done this all the time. I've been asked many times as well, Mr. President, to do the same out of courtesy also to the other sponsors to move it forward. I just ask for the same. But if the body does not agree, then I just ask for the same courtesy that be given to me that I've given to all our colleagues in the past.
Well, Mr. President, it's just a matter of hours, Mr. President. I mean, so that we just keep it in its current parliamentary stage, Mr. President. That's all. That's my request. I promise the interpellation will be short tomorrow, or it can even be waived upon. But we just need to go over all of the information that we got tonight in the past few days, Mr. President.
Session is
That's all
suspended.
my request. Wala na,
Hindi, bukas na lang. Ano yan? Ano naman to? After that. Session is resumed. Majority Floor Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2790 without prejudice to the appointment.
Mr. President.
Sorry, I withdraw my motion, Mr. President. Senator Pia Cayetano is seeking the floor.
Yes, Mr. President, I reiterate my previous motion that we close the period of interpellation without prejudice to further questions being asked during the period of amendment. And I'm also prepared to proceed with the committee amendments.
Duly noted, Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, it's been moved by Senator Cayetano. So I move that we suspend consideration of the Senate Bill number 2790 without prejudice.
Session is suspended. Close period without prejudice, introduce individual amendments. Open the period of individual amendments. Okay. Session is resumed.
Yes, Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2790 without prejudice to reopening the period without prejudice to suspended.
Session is suspended.
Yes.
Session is resumed. Acting on the motion of Senator Cayetano to close the period of interpellation without prejudice in order for it to introduce individual amendments, given that this is a substitute bill. Is there any objection? Hearing none. The same is approved. Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 24th session, Wednesday, September 18, 24, and consider the same as approved.